Lynn Rogers, thank you for the invitation tonight, and I want to thank the inductees, for all those that were involved with tonight's event. Special thank you to those that have, the volunteers and the workers and the staff that have put together really a first-class event. So well done, and a special thanks to all of them. West Virginia has, I was take a little walk down memory lane here because I went to Davis and Elkins College. Hold the applause, but I did go to Davis and Elkins. There's oh boy, here he goes. I can't say much because our president at Davis and Elkins is a West Virginia Wesleyan grad. So anyway, there are 18 private colleges / universities in West Virginia. There's 26 state college universities. So many of you know this information, but at the same token, this is a night to reflect on what's going on in West Virginia and how we got to this point with so many great people in this room. There were 3 colleges that were 35 miles apart, and it really created a triangle: Buchanan, Elkins, and Philippi. And in the next 20 years, those 3 schools dominated the national scene, which is hard to believe, dominated the national scene in soccer in the United States. In '67, Aldous and Broadus came to the national scene. 68, 69, and 70, Davis and Elkins came onto the national scene. And after that, Davis and Elkins won the 2 national championships. But after that, the next 20 years, so many schools, the same 3 schools dominated national play. West Virginia Wesleyan comes into the picture and wins 5 national championships. So this is all with this little school, these little schools in West Virginia that are really dominating the national scene. And that's really impressive. There's nowhere else where you'll see that in any state. And here you are in West Virginia with the private schools and what have you, are dominating the national scene. That's a lot to be proud of. But at the same token, there wasn't any high school or club soccer played. So all the players came from out of state. But what I think was the beauty of this is how many players stayed in state after they graduated and gave back to this wonderful state. The good players were coming. 1967 really started the 50 years of national recognition, as I mentioned. The key to this whole thing is from really till about 1994 when West Virginia Wesleyan had won it. Then it went a little quiet for a while, and then a little school called Morris Harvey. Do any of you remember that? Which is now the University of Charleston. They came onto the national scene, and they won 2 national championships out of the last 3 years. So that is, when you think about how many schools there are, that's a very impressive record. Also, this year marks 20 years that women have played intercollegiate soccer in West Virginia. Another very big milestone and a great opportunity. Yeah, definitely right. Some of my information may be a year or 2 off, but I think you all are getting the picture of what's going on. So that really was, and Marshall and West Virginia University also were a big powerhouse. And of course, Bobby Gray and what he did at Marshall and West Virginia was on the national scene as well. So quite a history of what's going on with soccer on the national scene, but started right here in West Virginia, which is very impressive. 50 years of intercollegiate soccer, as best as I could calculate, there are 135 All-Americans that came out of West Virginia, all of our colleges. Around 20 to 22 women All-Americans. Now, some of the archives don't go back that far, so I tried to extrapolate, but there's not, I think, maybe one other state that has that many All-Americans that came out of the college ranks like they have here in West Virginia. So it's quite very impressive. And all this time, these players went back to coaching high school, club teams, youth teams, and all of that. Then things went quiet. 74 to 85, the NASL made its first attempt. And they were alive for a while, the old North American Soccer League, and I was fortunate enough to play in that. But in 1979, I was doing the radio and television for the Fort Lauderdale Strikers on local TV. And in 1979, I heard that there was this crazy idea that somebody was going to put together an all-sports network, 24 hours a day sports. Now, we all know that was insane. That'll never happen, and it could never be. CNN got lucky, decided to do, the news situation. But 24 hours of sports, day in and day out, that'll never fly. Well, I sent my resume, my tapes, up to Bristol, Connecticut, and I didn't hear anything. So I was a coach at FIU at the time. I had already finished my illustrious career. I was at the end of a twilight of a very average career. And I sent up my information, didn't hear anything. So I was at Florida International University at the time. I was coaching, so I had a recruiting trip up north. I said, I'm going to pop into Bristol and see what's going on with this ESPN. So I pull into Bristol, and there is this double-wide trailer sitting on this huge piece of farm property. I go in, and there's a guy by the name of Scotty Connell, who is a legend now in Monday Night Football, and you name it, and his secretary, because they had secretaries at that time. And I asked him, what happened to and I said, this is ESPN, right? Yeah, he was very calm. And I said, I sent my information, and I was hoping that maybe you had a chance to look at it. Well, he had no idea what it was all about. At the time, ESPN had just signed a contract with the Big Ten network to do all of their championship games. That was a big deal. So they had locked in the Big Ten, no money or anything. So anyway, make a long story longer, he said, leave your information again with my secretary here and we'll get back to you. So I go home. I'm there a week. She calls and says, we need you to do the Big Ten championship soccer game, Indiana versus Wisconsin. I said, okay, you want to send the tickets? What's happening? Oh, no, just go ahead and go. Here's where you're going to stay and send us an invoice. Well, I was up at the double wide, and I'm like, and I'm a college coach, so I'm not rolling in money by any stretch. I'm not like Bobby Gray and some of these other coaches. If I had Bobby's money, I'd throw my money away. But so I thought about, okay, I'm going to go. So I went, did the game, came back home, sent an invoice in, and lo and behold, they paid me. And so I did about 24 more games after that. And so I was lucky enough to be the first guy to ever do a soccer match. Indiana, Wisconsin. Indiana was winning 8-0 at halftime because Wisconsin was a club team. And Indiana was a national powerhouse, as many of you know. So that is that's my claim to fame, as they would say, a legend in my own mind. But I think the next thing that comes up is 1990s were a decade that will never repeat itself in soccer history in the United States. It won't repeat itself. It just can't happen, the amount of things that took place in a positive way for the world of soccer. In 1989, the U.S. was awarded the World Cup, the 1994 World Cup. And the whole world was freaking out. How can you give the World Cup to a third world country, third world soccer country? World Cups were only given to Germany's and the Brazils and all the big names, and they gave the World Cup to a third world soccer country. We did not have a pro league. We had very few soccer facilities. And we are going to the 1990 World Cup with a high school all-star team. Sorry, college all-star team. Could have been a high school for the results. We go in 1990 Italy with a college all-star team. And we get embarrassed. I mean, it was a horrible, horrible defeat. The U.S. left after 3 matches totally destroyed. Harks, Ramos, trying to think some of the other guys, Vermes, Caligiuri, all these names. They left Italy after the World Cup and just started trying out for teams. And they were not received like our American players are now. This was not one of those, Oh yeah, you came to America, sure, we'll bring you in, you trained, this was really, you're an American thinking you're going to try out for our team, and as you know, most of these players became very, very excellent players and earned their bones in the tough leagues in Europe. 1990, Alan Rothenberg and Hank Steinbrecher. Alan Rothenberg is elected president. And this is because the World Cup Organizing Committee and because U.S. Soccer needed to run the federation professionally. And the next guy hired was Hank Steinbrecher, who was inducted here and also a Davis and Elkins grad and my fellow teammate. We were all, they were elected. Hank was then appointed general secretary, and then they decided that since we needed to figure out how to put a team on the field in 1994, our home field, we're hosting, how can we put a team on that field that will somewhat be respectable and we don't get embarrassed like we did in 1990. So in 1991, Bora Milutinovic was hired as the coach of the U.S. national team. He had won in Costa Rica with the good results in Mexico, and now he was taking a team. So the next discussion from Alan and Hank was, we're going to have a standing national team. That means we're going to pay players to be full-time players within the U.S. Soccer Federation. So now we're running a professional soccer team inside of a non-profit organization. So that already was my question, was how they were going to do that. And I don't want to get too far into the weeds, but this is how things changed so quickly and how they were trying to ramp it up. So the decision was, 1, we have a standing national team. 2, we find a training center that we can train for the next 3 years. And 3, we find a coach who can train up these college kids and really, really season them to be able to play and be competitive in the 1994 World Cup. So in 1991, I was hired as the general manager of national teams. And so the national teams is all the youth teams all the way up, including the women's national team, and the men's team, which is where the decision was, how do you fund that? Where are you going to get the money? We cannot go back to U.S. Soccer Federation, which has zero money, by the way. They're operating on a shoestring. How do we do this without really taxing or sending the U.S. Soccer Federation bankrupt? So the decision was to go out and play as many games as we could. My job was to find as many games as we could. We had zero marketing dollars, and to arrange games and make money from those games in order to keep the national team going really on a monthly basis. I also have a coach who says, I can't train these guys day in and day out. I need a match every 10 days. So to put on a national team match somewhere in the world every 10 days was quite a bit of a challenge. You only play Germany once a year. You play Brazil once a year. Remember, all these teams their players are playing for club teams and they play national team. And the only time they really break is for international breaks. Once again, I don't want to get into the weeds. So I got lucky so my job was to sign the players and also get the national team, which was in Mission Viejo, the national team base, our training center, and we trained there for 2.5 years. And find a match every 10 days for our coach because he had technical reasons and we also had financial reasons. We needed to generate some money. So I was running out of games. And what happened was, if you recall, Soviet Union broke up, went bankrupt, and all of those Soviet states all became independent states. And who do you think those independent states, Latvia, Lithuania, Armenia, Georgia, places I had never heard of, and here I am organizing matches, Romania. All those teams, the first time at Moldova, they were a national team. They want to play the United States, and they want to come to the United States. And for them, this was such an honor to come to the United States as a national team and play the U.S. team. And so those were the times that you remember as what's going on. So real quickly, 1991, the women win the World Cup in China. What a year. Unbelievable. 1996, the women win the Olympics. 1999, the women win the World Cup again. 1996, the MLS started. I mean, what a decade. It's just amazing how much took place during that time and where it came out of it. And the best part was in 1991, I met Dave Larraba. Hank Steinbrecher is the Secretary General, and I worked for Hank as a national team's general manager. And he says, you got to meet this guy from West Virginia, Dave Larraba. I said, I'm glad to. I'm D&E grad, and he brings me over to Dave, and that's when I met Dave in 1991, and it was a great experience. So that's kind of what took place back in the day. Now, there's money and everything. So everybody says to me, well, geez, when you're general manager, what's different now? I said, money. Nike walked in with a $14 million contract, August of 1994. Then General Motors came in. Then the money started rolling in. We used to, when I put on a women's national team game in '92, after they won in '91, we would lose about $100,000 a game. Just to show you how much that has all taken its, come full circle. And now we have the women, obviously, demanding and commanding top salaries, which is good. So that's, that really is an interesting whirlwind tour of soccer in West Virginia, and then how the decade, the 1990s will never be repeated. Never be repeated again, because there's just so much that happened there. How many of you in this room have been at least 5 years involved with soccer stuff? How many 10 years? And 15 years? I mean, the hands keep getting raised. This is unbelievable. 20 years. Well, you're the heroes of today, and you're the heroes that really absolutely make soccer go in America. I mean, we can talk about all the accolades and the top level of soccer, but the reality of this is you're the heroes that do the thankless jobs. You're molding our youth, and you don't get involved for definitely don't get involved for the money, right? And not the fame, but for the love of the game. So the heroes and the nights, the weekends, the hours, all that is you in this room. And time away from your families, you're the ones that definitely need to be appreciated, thanked, and helped with the state programs down to the smallest little rec team. And one other group I want to recognize who definitely get ignored are the referees. And to the referees, thank you for your hours, just as volunteers do, and as everybody else, so thank you. To all of you, that's definitely, Marcus talked about Volunteer of the Week in the AGM today, and our Volunteer of the Week recognition. This is a great award, and they should be doing that for the Referee of the Week also, but you've got to be recognized, and it's a thankless job and very, very much appreciated. So thank you again for the invitation, the opportunity to come back to West Virginia and to meet such great people like you. Thank you again.